Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's episode of Born Women and Words. And joining me, as always, is Michelle.
Hello.
And our guest tonight is the wonderfully fabulous Weina and Diana Randal, and we are here to talk about her book, Night Angels. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Diana. I'm so happy you invited me back.
It's always a pleasure to have you back and to be able to catch up with friends. And I've been listening to this book, so I haven't finished the book yet. But I've been listening to it and it is so fabulous, and I've been enjoying the audio version of it. But for those who are not familiar with Night Angels, can you give us a little synopsis?
Okay, so Night Angel tells a story of a diplomatic couple who risk their lives to save Jews in Vienna, Austria, by issuing them visas. The story was set in 1938, before World War II broke out. In 1938, the Jews in Vienna were facing intimidations and threats of expulsion by the Nazi government. And the government said you needed to get out of Austria or you go to labor camps. So for many Jews, they did not have any places to go because after Evian conference, 32 countries in the world denied to give them shelter. 32 countries, including the US, Britain, France, Canada, Australia. So the Jews in Austria didn't have a place to go. And in the end, it was the Consul General of a Chinese Consul General in Vienna who resisted his superior's order to issue Jews visas so they could escape the Nazis. And this novel is fiction, but it's based on the true story of Dr. Hou Fengshan, who was honored as righteous among nations. In 1938, Dr. Hou Fengshan was the Consul General of the Chinese consulate, and he issued more than 18,000 visas to Jews so they could escape to Shanghai and other countries as well. But Night Angels, I took a different approach. I wanted to tell this important episode of history, but I also wanted to expand the history a little bit more. So in Night Angels, you will read three perspectives. The one perspective is, of course, Dr. Hou Fengshan. The other perspectives are one is from his wife, Grace Lee, who was an American woman. And the third perspective was Lola Schnitzler, who was the Jewish girl, Jewish tutor that the diplomat's wife befriended. And this part of story, the story between Grace and Lola, is completely fictional because Lola is completely fictional. But the story about Dr. Hou Fengshan issuing visas is historical. It's based on many facts, and I did a lot of research that's using the primary source of his memoir in traditional Chinese and abridged English version. And of course, I also use other memoirs like written by his son, Wantou, who was with him at that time. Okay, this goes way on for too long. I'm sorry. You get a synopsis. I'm going more
It's
than
okay.
that.
I mean, I love it. And the thing with Dr. Hou Fengshan, I did not realize he was an actual person.
Yes.
Like, I knew that about the story. We had talked about this before about the Jews escaping to Shanghai because of we spoke about the Rose of Shanghai. But I didn't realize that he was the actual person until I was preparing the notes for this interview. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's an actual person. And they called him Chinese Schindler.
Yes.
Was what they called him. And I could see why. That you said it was 18,000?
Yes. As well, it actually is more than that, but we can only say like probably around that 18,000 because At least 18,000 Jews fled to Shanghai, but many Jews in Vienna also used his visas to escape to other countries like Palestine, the Philippines, and other countries. So we cannot confirm that. The beautiful thing about Dr. Ho Fanshan was he was a diplomat, and his concern was always about his country, as China at that time, and of course about his party, which was a nationalist party as well. It was not a communist party. So for him, who was a career diplomat, to resist his superior's order and did whatever he felt was the right thing, it took great courage. And in in 1938, when all the other diplomats said no, they would not resist the superior's orders to issue visas, he was the only one, the first one who did that. So another thing with him that's very heroic is he did not expect any recognition or any fame for whatever he did. He acted out of conscience and he did whatever he believed was the right thing to do.
I
And
really feel that that's a mark of a true hero, is that they
yeah,
do it out of, they realize it was something that they just needed to do, and they do it without recognition.
yes, and it was just the right thing to do. And he was stationed in Vienna from 1937 and 1940. In 1940, he was basically dismissed and fired for resisting his superior's order. So he was there for about 4 years, and his entire diplomatic career lasted for about 40 years. So 4 years out of 40, it's not that much, right? But the impact was enormous.
Mhm.
And however, in his memoir, though, he did not dedicate a lot of chapters on that part of history either. That's another thing. He was like, that was part of my career. I just did whatever I thought was the right thing. Let's move on. My job is being a diplomat. So later he was sent to Egypt as ambassador and to Mexico as ambassador. He had a glorious career, but that part of the tenure in Vienna changed many people's lives, and many people actually did not know him because those people came over to the consulate. You're not going to go meet the consul general, right?
Yeah.
So many people did not even know his name, did not see his face. They couldn't even pronounce his name anyway. That was written in Chinese characters. So when he was alive, nobody knew what he did. And his heroic effort was only discovered in 1997, after
Yeah.
he died. His obituary was printed, and then um, Eric So, the founder of Visas for Life project, read this description about him saving Jews in Vienna, and the Eric So contacted the family and started the investigation, and then the investigation lasted for a few years, and they finally realized, yes, he was the consul general who issued visas to thousands of Jews. And think about that, 18,000 Jews, they survived the Holocaust. How many families are there now? And
Yeah, so many families can thank him for their life
yeah,
because of what he did, of those heroic actions. And
mhm,
it was, when I was, what I loved about his character was that there was that moral point where he was really conflicted. The way, I love the way you played his character in the book,
mhm,
because you could see the conflict between his what he needed to do, what he felt was his duty,
mhm,
and versus what the moral side of things, and how those conflicted, and just the frustration. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I was in my car
mhm.
when the part about right after the council had met, and they're like, oh, it's not gonna happen. I was on my way to the LA Times Festival of Books, and I was just like, wait, what? They're doing nothing? What the hell? Like, I was yelling. It's like, this is not okay.
Yeah, everybody was like hoping, 32 countries get together. They gotta have some kind of solution, right? Franklin Roosevelt summoned this conference and everybody went. But in fact, the conference was just a vacation for all those leaders.
It truly was. And it shows how they were just so afraid of bringing on war, of not doing anything, no actions,
Hmm.
and how people just got caught up in their fear about a war that they just kept kicking down the road, that was inevitable, that was going to end up happening.
Hmm. Yeah. So, and you will see in the novel, I also told the story from his wife's POV. His
Yes.
wife's name was Grace Lee, and she was actually his second wife.
Mm.
And they divorced right after Vienna. So I wrote that in the story as well. And after the divorce, Dr. Hoffenstein married a Chinese woman who's the third wife. But when I was doing research, though, I couldn't find a lot of information about his second wife, Grace Lee.
Mhm.
Uh, a lot of information I received were from his memoir and his son Manto's memoir, who was with her for almost 8 years. So some people get confused today.
Mhm.
With they get confused that they thought I was writing about Dr. Hofenstein's current wife, who's still alive. So I just wanted to clarify that
Mhm.
Grace Lee was an American woman and she was Dr. Hofenstein's second wife. And they met in Chicago, according to Dr. Hofenstein's memoir. And she was half Chinese.
Mhm.
But in Dr. Hofenstein's memoir, he did not say what the other half was.
Mhm.
And in his son's memoir, his son said, well, she was half German. I doubted that. So that's one thing when you are a historical fiction writer, you find so many sources, so many description, and they kind of conflict with each other, and you have to decide which one to use, right?
Mhm.
So for me, I decided to follow Dr. Hofenstein's memoir because if she's like half Chinese and half German, and according to Dr. Hofenstein's memoir, she couldn't speak Chinese and she couldn't speak German. And I think it would be hard to believe that somebody who grew up with parents who's Chinese and who's German and couldn't speak either of the language.
Mhm.
So I decided, okay, so she's half Chinese. So, but the other half, I decided it's gonna be just be Irish. And she's from Boston because I just moved to Boston and I like the city. And at that time, 1920s, 1910s, there were a lot of Irish immigrants. So I was like, okay, so she's gonna be half Irish, half Chinese.
And I love how you brought up how there's that conflict when it comes to researching these women,
Yeah.
because like with Anita, with the woman in red, there were very few sources and no two were the same. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so hard if they're not a woman who has made her mark on the history books.
Yes.
And if they are poor, or if they are of oftentimes a woman of color, like
Mm-hmm.
in Grace's uh, position where she's half Chinese,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have hardly any information at all, because according
That's
to
right.
history
Yeah.
books, they don't matter.
That's
Uh,
right. Yes. You are right. You're right. Absolutely. And even for some women who made a mark in the history, sometimes the history is very difficult to
mhm,
find. All this information is like kind of lost, and because women's history is somehow not as important as some people believe, and then they just get overlooked and overshadowed. And
mhm.
yeah. That's just one thing that's very difficult to write about women's stories.
Mhm. And I think in a lot of ways, it's where historical fiction has a tendency to be able to pick up where the historians left off,
Hmm.
because we can fill in the blanks, we can put things together, we can create these, albeit fictional, but we can create these ideas to fill in those gaps
Hmm.
where the women just aren't there in the actual history books, where the
Yes.
historians have to be like, I don't know. I don't know what happened to them.
Yes, and as a historical fiction writer, you still needed to focus on your own drama and what
Mhm,
is exactly that you are trying to tell. What is the story? What is the core of the story? And
mhm,
you have to weave the history, weave all these incidents and timeline into the core. So some people might not like the idea because you would sometimes need to tweak the storyline or some details a little bit.
mhm,
But it's very difficult to follow every detail of the history while you are trying to tell your own story.
mhm. Oh, absolutely. It's such a, I, gosh, my last two books where I had to keep on top of things when it came to the dates. The dates alone, I
Mhm.
swear, I would just, my first book, I didn't even bother like putting the dates in there, and then I had to go back and do the dates, and then that was just like a whole other headache. But then, like, I feel like having those dates line up properly is one of the hardest things I ever do as a historical fiction author.
It really is a challenge, and
Mhm,
especially when you write about World War II and write about the Holocaust, you
mhm,
cannot get the timeline wrong. You cannot tweak it too much
mhm,
because people will notice and people will say you distort the history. Like,
mhm,
for instance, when I introduced um, Eichmann, Adolf Eichmann in
mhm,
the book started in May, so I did a research and I made sure he was there in Vienna in May, and I discovered that he actually was in Vienna in March, like
mhm,
1 week after the Anschluss. So he was there and he started to arrest the Jews and he started to raid the Jewish congregation a week after the Anschluss. So it's like, okay, that's fine. So I can start the book in May. Then that's when he's already in Vienna. So
mhm,
it was no problem. But then, and when the book progressed in 1939, he left Vienna in May 1939. And but he still needed to stay in the book. What should I do? So I actually, at first I made a mistake. I thought he left Vienna in July. So the plot was he was still in July. And then my copy editor, who you have copy editor as well, and the copy editor does the fact check for you,
mhm.
right? And she said, "Oh, Weina, no, he was not in Vienna in July. He has left." I was like, "Oh no, 2 months, 2 months. He has to go." So I had to figure out another plot to make sure that even though he wasn't in Vienna, he did something that
it's
summer in
it's
1939.
I swear, writing historical fiction, guys, it's fun. You totally want to do it. For those of you listening, this is the genre you want. I swear, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you do have some help as well, right? Your copy editor does the fact check, and they will tell you something, some mistakes, and
Oh,
you just hope they will catch all of that before the book is published.
they are the unsung heroes of the
Mhm.
publishing world. In all
Yeah.
honesty, they get those nooks and crannies. I had one who, my last one, like even like certain words, like one word sounded too much like another word. And it was like, do you want to use this in the same paragraph? Do you want to keep them?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, that's a great caveat. I was like, oh, I didn't realize they sounded so similar. But yes, I do want to keep them. It
Okay.
was just, yeah, one was more important than the other one, and the other one was just as necessary. And I was like, okay, yes, we'll keep them both. But those little details that you have to have when it comes to writing historical fiction, because there are those Wikipedia warriors that are out there.
Yeah, but Wikipedia sometimes is very misleading as well, and
Oh
some
yes. That's why I like to call them
well,
Wikipedia warriors, because
yeah.
they come and they'll I haven't really had it happen to me, but I know there are other authors that they get those misleading facts from
Mm-hmm.
Wikipedia,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, it happened this way, where it's like, no, because Wikipedia is user based and it's not,
Exactly.
yeah, it's not based on
Yes.
actual history, so you can't go by Wikipedia.
Yeah. And sometimes people will say, well, Wikipedia says this. Why does your book say that? They use Wikipedia as some kind of historical reference. Mine, I was like, no, look up the book, read this. And
Mhm.
I trust the books, the scholarly books,
Yes.
and other journals and like that. But it is like when you write historical fiction, you write about the past, what has happened in the past has already passed and has already gone, and then even now today it's different world.
Mhm.
Like for instance, in Night Angels, at one point the consulate that was on that the Chinese consulate rent the building the Chinese consulate rented was demolished. But if
Mhm.
you go to Vienna and you go to this address indicated, it's a hotel. It's there. It reads Carlton Hotel now. And then people will say, hey, the hotel is there, and you said it's demolished. So you made a mistake. But no, I was like, I'm did not make a mistake. You read this primary source, and you will say, you will know that the diplomat did say it was confiscated and demolished by the Nazi because the landlord was Jewish. And it was
Mhm.
very common at that time in Germany. If the property was owned by a Jew, they would be confiscated by the Nazis, and they would do whatever they want. They demolish it or do whatever they want. And people, though, today, I guess what you most people do is you look at the building, it's there, so it's there. It was not demolished. I
Mhm.
thought it was kind of it's difficult and pose a challenge for a writer to write a story like that.
Oh yes. Michelle, did you have any questions? Since we're just
Yeah,
I have just been sitting back and enjoying the conversation. I was just thinking of what you were saying about, you know, finding the balance between the historical record and what actually happened and
Mhm.
what you, through your research, what you're able to confirm happened,
Mhm.
and uh, oh, I can't think of the word, reconciling that with your story and finding that balance of history and fiction, because it is very uh, easy, I think, for a lot of people to forget the fiction of historical fiction.
Mhm.
And but so I don't write historical fiction. I don't think I ever could write historical fiction, but so many authors, I mean, every historical fiction author that we've ever talked to pays so much attention. I mean, even down to, did this word exist? Would they have used this
Yes.
word?
Yeah.
Or would they have, is this the kind of pen they would have used? Like these tiny details that historical fiction authors
Yeah.
pay attention to bring the world to life and that time period. But you do have to make concessions for the sake of your story. So that was kind of like rolling through my head.
I think, Michelle, you summarized it very well.
Thank you.
And then
In
one of the things
50 words or less.
yeah. And one of the things I love about the time period, because I just finished a World War II novel, and Weina with you, and this time period, I don't know if you felt it as well, because you get to use so much more of the English language. Like, our language has not changed all that much from the 1940s.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't have to necessarily focus so much on, well, did we use the word trek? What about this word? Was this word invented yet by 1940? That wasn't necessarily a thing that you have to worry about during that time period.
I did have something to worry about, like such as like the one part I was doing research about washers because the consulate they rented a place near laundry room, laundry mat. I was like, okay, what kind of washers did they use at that time in 1939
Well, like
in
the
Europe?
technology stuff. Yeah, that's something
Yeah.
like I had to
Mhm.
research refrigerators. What refrigerators did they use in Naples, Italy during the 1940s?
That's called icebox, right? At that
Yeah,
time?
it was still icebox. Yeah, the current refrigerator as we know it from the 1950s
Hmm.
was just starting
Yeah.
to come about, but
Mhm.
people in southern Italy weren't affordable for people in southern Italy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
for what was the thing for you with washers?
Yes. I figured that was commercial and they were very big. They were like not the size that we would be familiar with today. They were huge. And they make a lot of made a lot of noises. So I emphasized that part as well. But yeah, these are little details in the book. One thing though, when I was writing Night Angel, that was very difficult for me was German, the German language. You know,
Mm.
we talk about special words and technology, but when you are writing something that's coming from a different country, and especially Austrian culture, is so different from American culture and the Chinese. I had to learn that and had to understand how those Austrians saw themselves and had to read about the mindset. And it's the way it had um, a lot of interesting ways to express them because they address people differently and they saw them very much superior than everyone else because Vienna at that time was the most sophisticated civilization of the world. And it was a very wealthy country for many years. Of course, after the collapse and they went bankrupt and everything just went down. So for me, I had to read a lot of novels written by Austrian authors like Arthur Schnitzler and Stephen Zweig. And those novels were very insightful because the mindset was very interesting to know for me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All the little things that we have to research, the random stuff from technology to the cultural mindsets of these
Mhm.
other cultures that
Yeah.
we explore. And one of the things that you talked about earlier in the show that I found really interesting was the fact that when you read Dr. Ho Fengsheng's biography, you read both the Chinese and the English
Yes.
version.
Mhm.
And I assume you did that because there are certain things that will change in translation.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, you are right about that. I believe you read a lot of Italian too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I don't really exactly trust the English translation, even though it was translated by his son. Manto did a great job translating, but he also cut out a lot of details in his father's memoir. The father's memoir was about 700 pages long, but the English translation was like 200 or something.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I really want to know what really happened. And for me, because I read Chinese, I'm Chinese, I always wanted to read everything original first. And then
Mhm.
I can go back to see the English translation and to see what I can pick out on that. Yeah.
And since it was written by his son, I feel like you could probably have gotten a lot of insight into his son when you create it, even though the son is a child during the story, you can get some insight into his character of what he may have thought, because translations in a lot of ways is another person's interpretation of the other
Yes.
language.
Yes.
Like I've had books, my book, both of our books have been translated into other languages,
Yes.
and it's I was able to talk to and communicate and do interviews with my Italian translator, which was wonderful. But there's still that their interpretation of your work.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's this whole other thing. And I've read, like, even in fiction, there was the Lions of Sicily, the opening lines are different. Because the language changed. And then in the Neapolitan Quartet by Elena Ferrante, there is a fruit that is changed. In the English version, it's an apple. And in the original Italian, it's another fruit, which at the name I'm forgetting, but it's not a common fruit that's in the United States that I think English readers would know. So it's kind of like a crab apple is kind of what this fruit is. So it's a bitter kind of apple that isn't really good when it's not ripe. Yeah. And when you learn about that, it's like, okay, the context of the dialogue that happened makes better sense. When she was like, why are you giving me this fruit that's not ripe yet? But it's something that I think really, if you can get into the original text, if you're lucky enough to be able to speak the other language, it's so beneficial.
Yes, it is. So since we are talking about translation and something get lost in translation, The Last Rose of Shanghai, my third novel, was translated into Hebrew, which I'm very excited about, and it came out last month. And then I saw this cover. The cover is the same with the original copy. And then the Hebrew words were in there. Somebody told me the Hebrew words translation was not The Last Rose of Shanghai. It was The Last Lily of Shanghai. I was like, okay.
That's
so
interesting.
I cannot confirm it. I cannot read Hebrew, so I don't know.
Sorry, I think I froze, and then you guys froze, and then I stopped freezing.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, but it happens. If it doesn't happen at least once an interview, then something is not right. But I think we may have wandered without even asking. We may have wandered through most of our questions, which is fabulous. I love it when the interview just takes us where it wants to take us.
Yeah, I didn't even look at my notes. I didn't get a chance to do that.
See, like I said, we're just laid back and we have this wonderful conversation. I really, for this book, I really do love the characters. I mean, we didn't even touch on Lola and her family. And I'm not going to give things away, but there's just so much heartbreak that they had to endure with that family and then lose everything. Yeah,
I wanted to put Lola's narrative in there. Can you believe it, Diana? Initially, after I finished the novel, Lola's voice was not in it. It was just the diplomat and the wife and the diplomat, like that. And then I read the whole thing. I was like, I feel somebody wants to come out. The person wanted it to be there, and that's Lola. And I really feel like Lola was speaking to me. She wanted to be there. And I just sat down and finished Lola's narrative in 1 week and put the whole thing in.
Wow. That's wonderful. That's so cool. And it's true, because I mean, I know we might sound like we're crazy because we're like, there's this voice that just really wanted to be there, but it's so true with the characteristics and the novel. Because what I love about her perspective as well is we get to see outside of the effects of these these laws that are happening to the people, and how she tries to transition and tries to help her family. But everything, there's just so many roadblocks and hurdles, even with Dr. Shan, when he finally gets everything taken care of, like, okay, I can put them out. And then you've got Eichmann going, oh, wait, no, stop. No, we've got to do something else. They got to prove something else. Because I felt like, I was starting to feel like, no, they don't really want them to leave the country.
That's
They
right.
just want to
Yes.
kill them.
Yes.
Is what it came down to.
Yeah, that was the common technique that the Nazis used, the use of deception. They gave this illusion to the Jews that they could control their lives, they could make their life better, and this was the deceptive way for them to do it. But instead, the Jews had to jump through so many bureaucratic loops in order to go get the freedom. But even when they get the freedom, they thought they did, they still need to do more in order to survive. It was the same thing, like for those Jews, they were sent to the labor camps and they were told that, hey, if you have a visa, you will be free. And then those families went to consulates asking for visas, waited outside for days and months, and finally got visas. And then the Nazis will let them go. They will be free. But then a few days later, the Jews will be arrested again. It was just like repetition like that. Because at that time, Adolf Eichmann, he was the chief of immigration office, and his goal was to get the Jews' assets. And the Jews get out of the country, but the slogan was the Jews must go, but the assets needed to stay. It was excruciating for people in Vienna, but for Lola, like many people at the beginning of 1938, they still considered Vienna as their home. They considered them as a citizen of Vienna, and they did not want to leave the country. They said, my future is here in Vienna, in Austria. I'm Viennese first, and Jews second, because many Jews were secular and like Dr. Freud, and they did not even practice Judaism. But they were, yeah.
That's so just, heartbreaking to think about. And when you look at, there's so many lessons I feel like that we can look at through the lens of history and apply to today, where we're looking at other people in other countries, the refugees that are coming here, the people who are walking by foot to the United States. It's not like they just decide, hey, I want to leave my country. People don't just say, hey, wake up one morning and be like, hey, you know what? I think it would be a great idea to just pick up and move to another country. This stuff that I have planned, all this, well, yeah, you know what? I don't need it. I'm just going to start over somewhere else. And when you're established, you have a family, your family and your history, that's not what people do. That's not characteristic of people. And it's just heartbreaking to know that we haven't really learned a damn thing when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, this is one part that I'm happy that you reached the conclusion. Of course, there was this echoes of politics in the book as well, which was terrifying because when I was writing the book, it was in 2020.
I am so glad that you brought that up, because when I was writing my my last book, it was the same thing. So much of the politics that you just, I mean, we don't want to get political. We try not to get political here, but my God, I was annoying my husband so much where I was just like, oh my God, it's a repeat. Everything's repeating itself. And I was just like, because I was writing it from 2020 to 2022.
2022, okay.
Yeah, it was the one that my last book that I was working on took me 2 years, and it's strange. I mean, I feel like, I don't know, for you, is it strange when you're writing historical fiction, you're writing something like this, where you're writing about things that are like happening historically, and then you turn on the news, like, and you're just going about your daily life, and oh, hey, this came up, and you're like, crap, I wrote about something very similar, and this is not okay. We haven't learned anything.
Yeah, it really is terrifying when you think about this. We really don't learn that much, right? Everybody think we are a lot more intelligent than people at that time, but I don't know. I don't know.
We're not. I don't think we are. I really I think our toys just get fancier. We don't get any smarter.
Sorry, my headphones literally just died on me.
Oh.
Let me switch.
So
Switch back out
did you have
here.
any more questions?
That
Because I
was
believe
rude.
we are definitely at our half hour.
Oh yeah, I think
Wait, hold on. Nope. Sorry, you guys continue. I'll figure this out.
Okay, well,
Okay.
I believe we're at our half hour, so that's what I was going to ask you, Michelle, if you had any other questions.
I think they aren't dead just yet. No, I think I've just had so much fun. Oh, they're at 5%. That was the 5% warning. I've just had so much fun just listening, and there are episodes sometimes that I'm doing all the questions and chatting, and Diana kind of like sits back and listens, and then there are episodes when Diana does the legwork and I'm just along for the ride, and tonight I was along for the ride, and it was fabulous.
Yeah, I have a lot to talk about with Diana, I guess.
I know we always have such wonderful conversations, and
Yeah.
I'm so looking forward to when we get to go to Historical Novel Society, because I think we're probably going to end up closing out the bar.
Are we? Wait,
Are
what?
we at the bar at the Historical Novel Society conference?
Oh yes. Oh yeah, I will be there, I think. I have like 2 panels I needed to be there, and then we will have a book signing. Yeah, let's catch up when we go there.
Yes,
Okay?
yes, and that's like I said, we'll be closing out the bar. We'll be just sitting there and talking. We won't necessarily
Yes,
be drinking
definitely.
and
Yes.
dry, but we'll be talking the whole time.
Yeah. Oh man, I have the events lined up this week and next week and the week after, so my mind is not in June yet.
Sometimes there are months when I'm already working like a month ahead, and then I have to remind myself like, no, we're not in June. We just started May. Like we're not there yet. But
Oh,
My mind's already in June. It's already there. I'm already like, because I'm preparing for the conference. I'm doing it's not just a panel, it's like a presentation. So it's almost like a workshop on podcasting, actually. So
oh my goodness. Oh, okay. Yeah, you are doing
yeah.
such a good job with
Oh,
podcast, and it's very popular. So everybody wanted to talk to you. So yeah, that would be very helpful.
yeah. So we'll be at first, thank you. But I will also be talking about utilizing podcasts as an author and how to be able to pitch and get on them. And then yeah, so I'm already like working with, like, I hit up the person that I'm doing the workshop with. I'm like, hey, June's coming up, we got to figure out what we're going to be talking about.
Oh, yes.
So yes, there's that, and there's some doing at least one book event with a friend, and she's got a book coming out this summer, and I'm also like home construction stuff. So like my mind, I'm like, May? What's May? Is there something happening in May? I have no idea what's happening in May. May doesn't exist. I know, I'm future forecasting.
it's one really long weekend before June. That's all it is.
It's pretty much what it is.
Well, so Night Angels is out in the world now.
Yeah.
So if anyone would like to order your own copy, you can always check out our show notes and click on the link to our bookshop on bookshop.org and order your own copy. As always, bookshop.org supports bookshop.org supports our wonderful writers. It supports the podcast, but most importantly, it supports all of the wonderful indie bookstores out there. And this has been like a very easy podcast episode for me. I've just had a blast for putting on such a wonderful conversation for me.
It was enjoyable for me. Yeah, like I said, it's always enjoyable and a pleasure to talk to Diana. And you too, Michelle.
Oh, thank you.
And I always look forward to talking with you, Weina.
Oh, wonderful.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right. Okay. Guys, have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.